What? Okay. Something went wrong.
Uh-oh. Well, mine says live up in the corner for 32 seconds.
Okay. Well, let's see. We have here, it's live on Facebook and live on YouTube. So we'll just keep on going. So everybody, welcome to week 5 of the HR Disruptor Summit 2022. My name is Jan Barlow, and I am the founder of the HR Disruptor Summit. My guest, great guest today, that's going to engage with you is Crystal Yates. Crystal, thank you so much, my friend, for another year with the summit. And you are one of the queens of HR Disruptor. So I am just so pleased and grateful that you are with us today. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. You know, I'm always excited to be here. I love our conversations, and I think we both get so much out of it, and hopefully everybody else will too. So
I love it. And, you know, Crystal and I met back in 2018 through Dallas HR, which we'll give a little plug for our peeps there. Dallas HR is the second largest SHRM organization in the country. And I got to tell you, just the people that I met that are true friends like Crystal, Kristen Durney, et cetera, just really am grateful for that opportunity to serve our HR community, but also to meet wonderful people like Crystal. We really had a synergy when it came to seeing what is out there for work as far as work-related information, not only for, you know, just individuals, right, that are growing personally and professionally.
Yes.
We talk about behavior diversity. So typical or traditional DE&I is always talking about external differences. Well, in 2018, I pretty much trademarked behavior diversity because literally from a science and psychology-based evidence, that it's our differences that we can't see that influences and affects our perception of others. So Crystal and I we dug deep with this and really enjoyed co-creating this content. So Crystal, if you would just share a little bit about your background, please.
So I have been in HR for a lot of years, most of it in very small businesses. We are talking under 20 employees. And back in 2015, I started my own consulting firm. So now I work not only in my own small business, I've got 6 employees, but I work with small businesses who average between 10 and 20 employees as well. So I get to see all the HR issues on a much smaller scale than a lot of my peers. But I think it also brings some of those things to the forefront because those problems tend to be much bigger in a small organization.
Well, and don't you, I think you and I both agree, first of all, 90% of businesses in the US are small to mid-sized businesses. And that was one of the things that we talked about when it came to any large organization. Most of the time they're focused on, you know, even though they most of their memberships are small and mid-sized businesses, right? They bring examples or sponsors or speakers from large companies, right? And so there's always a disconnect of, hey, that's great information, but, you know, when you got $1 million plus budget and how many employees in a staff, you know, an HR or a department of, you know, 10 or, you know, even 5, right?
I mean, how do I make it work for me?
Yeah. And that was the biggest thing is how can we provide information about topics that are relevant to small and mid-sized businesses, as well as the solopreneur, right? That's really key. So when we dug down to talk about behavior diversity, it really allowed us to cross, it's not just work, it's home as well, right? I mean, this work life separation is no more. 2020 put us all on the level playing field. Didn't matter socioeconomic situation or anything, right? We were all put in the same bubble. And when it came to work, we're working from home, right? So we can't go put Pandora back in the box. We've launched into a new era, and we really need to start talking about both work and home, right? We're one and the same people, so we can't divide it. So
and be separate people in separate place. Well, it's not even separate places anymore, right? I've been saying since 2020 the 9 to 5 is dead.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, and it was, we didn't acknowledge it prior to that, but now you can't.
Yeah, right.
You can't.
It was slowly dying. Yeah.
And that has a lot, again, those blurred lines, or it's not much blurred, it's just integrated lines, right? I mean, blended lines. Really, when it hit me, when I think about my experience in corporate America, and my background's from medical device, a global medical device and pharma company. And literally I was in the middle between clinical R&D and technical support, and then business development, sales, and marketing. So I was literally on the fence between these two divisions and departments. And with my own experience, it was really when we were going for second generation medical device approval, right, through the FDA. There's what's called a red folder process. So back, how it used to be, now it's all electronic, but you had this red folder that you're collecting all this information, data, et cetera, and checking off the box, right, of what all you have to do for this clinical trial. And me, because I was in sales and marketing, business development, I had to go back and do clinical training. I was seeing a big difference. When I go over to the clinical and R&D, they said, Jan, we like you, even though you're from the dark side, from sales, right? I'm like, you're the devil, they said. I'm like, where do you where do you come up with these things? And then, you go to sales and the marketing, and they're like, okay, well, what the heck are those people doing in R&D? I mean, are they under a rock or what, right?
Different focus, different languages. Yes.
And they're not talking to us. We might get an email, right? So the communication style was totally different. Well, so fast forward to realize that literally those silos of behavior, right? Of when you talk about behavior traits or a scale of behavior traits, from 1 to 10, they were the total opposite. But to see that the company lost a $1 billion plus investment because they lost their FDA approval, all because they didn't have this bridge. They didn't know. They just were in their silos. I was the only one that could see this. And I said, well, there's a problem here. Like we're not communicating. Like we need to get people together, and we need to. So the answer was, here's a credit card, go take them bowling. I mean, I get it. Kumbaya moments. I mean, it was fun, but I can only put together so many bowling and water gun and paintball gun excursions. That really doesn't help facilitate communication, right?
Really? Because this team's over here doing their thing, and this team. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it just, it was a good effort, but it really needed something at a deeper level, right? Crystal, what do you see, like in the traditional work arena? What do you see, especially that it's that bad? I mean, I know that was years ago, but I don't see that it's changed.
Working at the levels that I do see there are those outliers out there that know how to communicate, just like you, Jan, with different, but I still see a lot of that separation. And pulling it back into the very small businesses that I work in, I see hiring issues because this is the way I communicate as a leader. Therefore, I'm only going to hire people who communicate the same way as I do. And while that's not always bad, you're leaving a lot on the table, right? When you're a very technical, numbers-based data cruncher thinker, you need some people in there.
Yeah.
You know, and I hate to use the word diversity in that, but that's exactly what you're looking for. You know, I know, you know, I have strengths, I have weaknesses. As a small business owner, I need to hire people to fill in my weaknesses. And if I'm only hiring people that I communicate well with, I'm probably not filling in all those gaps, right? So that's really where I'm seeing the biggest challenges is we're holding our organizations back by not learning to communicate better. And that's really what a lot of this comes down to. And
it does. It really does, especially when you said it's so vital for small businesses. I just know you and I, we have great talks about when it comes to our teams and who we work with for our business, right? It is essential to know what your strengths are, right? And know what differences and how to leverage that.
yes,
Because, you know, there's something called groupthink. So, you know, we talk about culture fit, right? When hiring for culture fit, I got to be honest, this is 2019. We're talking Forbes, we're talking Harvard Business Review, SHRM, all published articles during those years saying, is, you know, hiring for culture fit a form of discrimination? You know, let's just call it like it is.
Right.
You can have all the external diversity all day long, but unless, I mean, if you took all those people with a lot of external diversity, whether it be a department or a company, and you had them take a behavioral assessment, right, that measures behavioral, right, not DISC or anything like that. We're talking about using a true scientific assessment of measurement behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
1 to 10, and you will see that scattergram will have
Right.
lumps, right? A majority of people lumped in segments, right? That's, you have your outliers. Some, I mean, I know we did one of our white papers that we had done at a university in a DEI department, and they had all the external represented, right? That's again typical traditional DEI, and literally they had no behavior diversity at all. And when we started to talk about that, they commented about how they really aren't innovative. Like everybody just goes along. There's no new ideas. There's nobody questions.
Because
So,
they don't have those personalities in there. But how do we bridge that? How do we maintain a positive work culture? Because we all have different definitions of what that means, but bring in diversity as well.
you know, it takes education, right? Because we all attract people, we're comfortable around people like us. Doesn't matter whether it's external or internal, right? Differences, whether it's
Agreed.
behavior or external. So with that said, that's just a human law, right? That's just a natural,
Right.
like animals, right? So first we have to be educated about it. And really understand first acceptance of self and then acceptance of others, right? So
Very well. Yes.
I mean, that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest thing. So, you know, really when we look at self-discovery versus self-mastery, we got to kick it up a notch, right? We got to up our human game.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I would love for you, Crystal, to share about your daughter, if you would, because, you know,
Yes.
we talk about work, right? But behavior diversity is about human to human.
Absolutely.
So would share
Absolutely.
your
So
story.
I have a preteen we were having some behavior issues with. We took her and had her tested. We actually had her tested for Asperger's. She was shutting down. She was not. Well, good news is she tests perfectly normal in that range, but come to find out, she processes verbal information very slowly. Well, Jan, you know me. I'm type A. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Moving forward, I asked you a question. Answer it for me. Right?
Wine bottle or gallon bucket, right?
There you go. And so when I sat down with her doctor and discussed this, she said, slow down. So I took that knowledge and I took this constant disconnect with my daughter. We were constantly arguing because I was constantly saying, would you quit ignoring me? I asked you a question. I asked you a question. Answer it.
Listen to me.
And right, because you think that they're just completely blowing you off. And I learned to take a step back. I'd ask her the question. If I'd find myself doing this, I'd stop. I'd count to 15 in my head. And now it's a lot more natural. But now we don't fight. I'm not never, but we don't fight about those things. And she and I are learning how to communicate so much better because I learned. I took the educational piece, but then I also took the responsibility and said, what can I do differently to communicate well with her? Just recognizing and being aware of that difference has completely changed my relationship with my daughter. It's incredible.
Is that, and what's interesting is once you saw a clinical evidence, right? Fact-based. That's why we say when we do the behavior diversity training, it's about looking at an objective piece of paper here that says, oh, like that first level of, oh, okay, that I recognize me, like that answers me, that I can connect with that. Yeah, that affirms me and how I perceive myself.
Because you've otherwise got this really, really intelligent kid person, right? And so you know that she must be ignoring me because she's so smart.
Yeah, it must be intentional.
Right. And if we can just learn to look at other people and recognize that, right, there's going to be those differences.
You know, that whole two-step process, again, with looking, from a clinical side, like seeing that evidence, and then all of a sudden now taking that personal side out, being offended, right? She's just not listening to me, or, being able to look at that and go, oh, now the personal is aside, and like, it's almost like you take away a veil or a block, right? Now it's not personal. Now
but let me tell you what the other important piece was, right? I could have said, dear, you need to figure out how to react faster because this is how your mom is. I took responsibility. And as leaders, even the HR folks out there that aren't leaders, I think if we all learn to take responsibility for trying to recognize and shift our thinking about those differences, then we can all start to shift the way we act around each other. But taking that responsibility, that was huge. I didn't have a choice. I'm her mother, right? There was no question around.
Well, you didn't have a choice. I mean, you could be a bad mom. Okay.
That one's easy. Sometimes the lines aren't as clear and we say, well, I'm not the one that should have to adjust, right?
And that's more on the work end, right? It's like, oh, I shouldn't have to be the one to have to change.
I pay you, you need to, but maybe not. Maybe a small shift on our part can make a huge shift overall and to our benefit.
That stretch, right? Because that's the thing, she takes in information like a wine bottle, see, feel, hear, and touch. You take it in as a gallon bucket. Even it could be just two numbers difference. It doesn't have to be like a 1 and a 10 on that extreme. Literally, when there's two numbers difference to that, you can feel the resistance gap, that subconscious irritation of, you're not listening to me. Right? Right? And it allows you, I mean, when you look at it and just say, oh, again, you're not doing it to me intentionally. It just is what it is. But
Right.
that stretch, what do we got to do to at least come together closer? May not be in the same bubble, right? When there's more than two numbers, it is what it is. You can stretch a little bit, but after, like a rubber band, when you stretch too much, it's going to break, right? So it's being able to tether between that bridge and really just accepting it for what it is.
Yes. And
Right?
if we can all learn to do that, right? If there's 4 digits between us and I can only move 2, but if you move 2 as well,
Yeah.
now we've come together.
And we don't have to, it's that realization also, I'll never know what life is like in your bubble if you are an 8 in pace and I'm a 4. Okay?
That's right.
So, but we can at least come together to see how we can bridge that resistance gap for the time for a project or while we work together on things, right? And it's the noticing or knowing, being aware that it can go south real quick.
Right.
That we got to watch that. And I think that's the big thing that I know the feedback that we get when we do the behavior diversity training, people always say, it's really glad that I know this so I can be aware of it. So I won't take it personally, or that's something I'm going to be aware of so I don't automatically react, be offended. And now our whole work relationship or whole personal relationship has gone south, right?
And we live in a world where people like to get offended, right? And so if we can pull ourselves out of, yes, we can pull ourselves out of that, and instead of getting offended, say, and I think we have every right to call each other out on those things, but instead of saying, oh, Jan, I can't believe you said that to me, you are so rude, and just instead, if I say, Jan, boy, that didn't sit well with me. What made you think it was okay to say that to me, Jan?
Yeah.
You know, different perceptions, different backgrounds, different realities, really, and I think it can grow into much larger things. You know, I think about I've got a girlfriend who's Jewish, and we were talking about how down here in Texas, where there's not a ton of Jews, things can really, we're just not used to being around that. And she was talking about how people use the term Jewing you down. And I went, I've used that before. Didn't mean anything by it. It's just a word that I learned.
Right.
But I can absolutely see how offensive it would be to her. I have never used it since. I will never use it again. But she, instead of getting mad at me and deciding that she didn't want to be around me and that I was a racist, she educated me. And we're now more able to, and actually now I can ask more questions and become even more educated. So now I'm moving.
Curiosity, right?
Yes. So now I'm moving more into, you know, bigger diversity, more physical, but that's how we start, right? And it starts with that behavioral understanding that people raised in a different way than us are going to behave in different ways.
That's right. And, you know, like I know a lot of people, especially women and men, you know, somebody could say, especially if you're in the sales profession, salespeople are pushy. I had a client that was in, you know, she was in the HR space, and literally when we were looking at job matches and how to transition her position to other opportunities, she was a 90% match to sales and technology. And she just stopped and said, I couldn't do that. Salespeople are pushy. Well, on the scale of 8 to 10, she is an 8 on assertiveness. So when we look at what I love about the analytics of it, right? If you score a 1 or a 10 on any of the behavior scales, you represent 2.5% of 140,000 people.
Wow.
That means 97.5% or 98.5% of 140,000 people aren't like you. So you shouldn't expect it, right? But our perceptions and stereotypes of professions or people, right?
Wrap into, yep.
And that's why I say we can't be objective about ourselves. That's a scientific, psychological fact. So very much out of the mouths of babes when she said salespeople are pushy, but she's on a scale of 8 out of 10. Believe it or not, she only represents like 7.5% of 140,000 people. So
she's that high.
Yeah. But her perception or stereotype of salespeople, we had to work to bridge that type to what a reality is for her, what that could look like. You know what I'm saying? So our own perceptions of others can get in the way of our own advancement and growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. She's too quiet. There's no way she can step into a leadership position.
Yes.
I don't know. Have you tested her yet? Right?
Right. Because she might be a 4 on sociability, right? And this other person might be a 9.
Right.
Right. And for that position, it's like leaders. We always say we have this misconception that only certain people can be leaders. Everybody has leadership skills. They're leaders. Everybody leads differently, right?
Right.
I mean, I think the biggest, when we talk about behavior diversity, is just really understanding these differences that we can't see, but literally it's creating our perceptions of others. Like the person's too loud, right? Too assertive, too slow. And that's really it's a myth, right?
And then we're spreading that. We're creating these personas for other people, right?
Projecting, right?
There you go. Yes.
It just really, we're projecting. It's a non-truth, right? And all that's doing is perpetuating misunderstanding even more.
And if we could just learn to communicate differently, be more aware of other people's communication styles, and just be open to other possibilities.
That's big. Be open to be curious, to learn more about others, learn more about yourself in relation to others, right? I think get rid of the shame and blame and the judgment. If we can just do that. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you have to reprogram your brain.
I tell people all the time, the best thing you can do for your peace of mind is always assume the best of somebody else. We get into these situations, the last 2 people were rude to me, you were a little short, I automatically go, oh, Jan's rude. And if we can swap that thinking and assume the best of people, call them out when you need to, but do it politely and kindly and assuming they meant well, and get clarification. Think about the troubles and the issues that would go away in not just the work world, but in our personal lives.
Oh my gosh. I mean, spreads across, right? It's not in silos. It then just evolves, beyond that, right? It just starts spreading, especially when you're taking that outlook of expect the best.
Right.
Right. Drop the, shame and blame or guilt or, what do you say? Presupposition of others, right? But it does take work to reprogram your brain to
It
do that,
does.
right?
It does. You absolutely, we hear what we're programmed to hear. And you have, just like with my daughter, I had to learn coping mechanisms to go, stop, count 15, it's okay, right? So what do we need to do to better communicate with those others around us, right? We have to find those ways. And eventually they become natural.
And again, that's self-mastery, to expand and grow yourself, because that's going to only benefit how you interact and grow with others, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My friend,
And
thank you so much for our time together today.
I am so grateful to be on this. I always learn from you, Jan. Thank you.
My friend, I just really appreciate you, and just all our time of co-creation over the last few years just really means a lot to me. And thank you so much for being part of the HR Disruptor Summit Peer Advisory Forum, your support, and sharing your gifts and talents with us.
I am grateful to be part of it. Thank you, Jan.
All right, everybody, we hope to see you next week. Next Thursday is going to be week 6 of the HR Disruptor Summit 2022. And we look forward to seeing you then. And until then, have a great day. Bye.